I never thought watching my father eat breakfast would become the most terrifying thing I'd ever witnessed. But there I was, frozen in our kitchen doorway, watching him vomit up everything he'd just swallowed, his face twisted in agony, and knowing deep in my gut that this wasn't just food poisoning or a stomach bug. Something was desperately, terribly wrong, and the worst part, none of us, not even the doctors, suspected where the real problem was hiding. My name is Sarah, and I grew up in a small town in Oregon where everybody knew everybody's business. Our family lived in a modest 2-story house with a wraparound porch that my father, Robert, had built with his own hands 20 years ago. Dad was a carpenter, a man of few words but strong convictions. He believed in hard work, self-reliance, and never complaining about anything ever. My mother, Linda, was his opposite in many ways. Warm, talkative, always fussing over everyone's health and happiness. She taught elementary school and brought that nurturing energy home every single day. I'm the oldest of 3 siblings. My brother James was always the practical one, following in Dad's footsteps into construction work. And then there's my younger sister Emma, the free spirit who moved to Portland to pursue art and only came home for major holidays. Me, I was the observer, the one who noticed things others didn't, which is probably why I was the first to realize something was seriously wrong with Dad. Our family wasn't perfect, but we had something solid. Sunday dinners were sacred. Dad's workshop was his temple. Mum's garden was her pride. We argued about politics and laughed at old stories and generally took our togetherness for granted. The way families do when they think they have all the time in the world. It started so subtly that we almost missed it. About 3 months before everything fell apart, Dad began eating smaller portions. Mum noticed first, of course. "Robert, you barely touched your pot roast," she said one Sunday evening, concern creasing her forehead. "Just not that hungry." "Lynn," he replied, pushing back from the table. "Getting older, I guess. Don't need as much fuel." He laughed it off, but I caught something in his eyes, a flicker of discomfort he was trying to hide. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention. Dad would sit at the table, fork in hand, moving food around his plate more than actually eating it. He'd take a few bites, chew slowly, then excuse himself. Sometimes I'd hear him in the bathroom afterward, but when I asked if he was okay, he'd just wave me off with that stubborn pride of his. "I'm fine, Sarah. Stop fussing." But he wasn't fine. His clothes started hanging looser. His face looked drawn, older somehow. Mom was beside herself with worry, practically begging him to see a doctor. But Dad was old school about these things. Real men didn't run to the doctor for every little thing. Real men toughed it out. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Tuesday, unseasonably cold for September. Dad had barely eaten dinner again, and this time he couldn't hide the pain etched across his face. When he thought no one was looking, he pressed his hand against his chest. "Wincing, Dad," I said quietly, "please tell us what's wrong." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in my father's eyes. Not the kind of fear you get from a scary movie or a close call on the highway. This was deeper. This was the fear of a man who knew something was profoundly wrong with his body and had no idea what to do about it. The morning it all came to a head started like any other. I'd stayed over at my parents' house that night, something I'd been doing more often since Dad's symptoms worsened. I woke up early to the smell of coffee and found Mom in the kitchen, her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. "He's up," she whispered. "He said he wanted to try eating breakfast." Dad came down the stairs slowly, gripping the banister. He'd lost maybe 30 pounds by then, and it showed in the gauntness of his cheeks, the way his wedding ring slid loose on his finger. But there was determination in his jaw. He was going to eat breakfast, damn it, because that's what normal, healthy people did. Mom had made his favorite: scrambled eggs, toast with butter, a few strips of bacon. Simple, easy food. Dad sat down, picked up his fork, and took a bite of eggs. I watched him chew carefully, swallow deliberately. He took another bite, then another. For a moment, hope flickered in Mom's eyes. Then Dad's face went pale. His hand flew to his throat. He tried to stand, but stumbled, gripping the edge of the table. And then he vomited, violently, everything he'd just eaten coming back up, along with what looked like everything from the night before. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the sound he made. This horrible, strangled gasping, like he couldn't get enough air. "Robert!" Mom screamed, rushing to his side. I was already calling 911, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Dad was doubled over now, retching and gasping, his face turning an awful shade of red, then purple. Something was blocking his airway, but it wasn't food in the traditional sense. This was something else, something deeper, something we couldn't see. The ambulance arrived within 10 minutes, but it felt like hours. The paramedics got him stabilized enough to transport, asking rapid-fire questions we couldn't really answer. When did this start? Has he been able to keep anything down? Any chest pain? Difficulty breathing? Everything, Mom sobbed. He vomits everything. We thought it was his stomach, maybe an ulcer or... "We need to get him to the hospital now," the lead paramedic said, his tone urgent but controlled. I rode in the ambulance with Dad while Mom followed in her car. I held his hand, watching the monitors, listening to his labored breathing. His eyes found mine, and I saw something there I'd never seen before. Vulnerability, raw and unfiltered. "I should have listened," he whispered. "Should have come in sooner." "You're going to be okay," I told him, squeezing his hand even though I had no idea if that was true. At the emergency room, everything moved in a blur of activity. Nurses, doctors, machines beeping and whirring. They wheeled Dad away for tests, blood work, x-rays, CT scans. Mom, James, Emma, and I huddled in the waiting room, holding cold cups of coffee we couldn't drink, making small talk about nothing because we were too terrified to voice what we were all thinking. After what felt like an eternity, a doctor came out. Dr. Martinez, her badge read. She was younger than I expected, with kind eyes that couldn't quite hide her concern. "We need to talk about your father's test results," she said, gesturing toward a private consultation room. My heart sank. Nothing good ever came from being taken to a private room. We sat down. The four of us lined up like students awaiting judgment. Dr. Martinez pulled up images on her computer. Scans I couldn't begin to interpret. "Your father's symptoms had us initially looking at his stomach and digestive tract," she began. "The persistent vomiting, the inability to keep food down, the weight loss, all classic signs of a gastrointestinal issue. But the scans revealed something we didn't expect." She pointed to an area on the scan, a shadow that meant nothing to me, but clearly meant everything to her. "The problem isn't in his stomach at all. It's in his esophagus. Specifically, there's a significant blockage in the lower portion of his esophagus, right where it meets the stomach." "A blockage?" Mom's voice was barely a whisper. "You mean like food stuck?" "No, a mass. We need to run more tests to determine exactly what we're dealing with. But based on what we're seeing, along with your father's symptoms and how rapidly he's declined, we're looking at the possibility of esophageal cancer." The word hung in the air like a physical thing, heavy and suffocating. Cancer. My father had cancer. Not in his stomach, where we'd all assumed, but in his esophagus, hidden away, where we couldn't see it growing, slowly cutting off his ability to swallow, to eat, to live. Emma started crying immediately. James went rigid, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles working. Mom just stared at the doctor like she'd spoken in a foreign language. "That can't be right," Mom finally said. "He would have had symptoms earlier. He would have. Esophageal cancer is particularly insidious," Dr. Martinez explained gently. "Early stages often have no symptoms at all. By the time difficulty swallowing becomes apparent, the disease has usually progressed significantly. The fact that he's now unable to keep anything down indicates the tumor has grown large enough to cause a near-complete obstruction." The days that followed were a masterclass in how quickly life can unravel. Dad was admitted immediately, started on IV nutrition since he couldn't eat, and scheduled for a biopsy and additional imaging to stage the cancer. The word stage became part of our vocabulary, along with prognosis and treatment options and other clinical terms that felt obscene when applied to my father. I'll never forget the conversation we had that first night in the hospital. It was late, after visiting hours, but the nurses looked the other way when I slipped back into Dad's room. He was awake, staring at the ceiling, the blue glow of monitors casting shadows across his face. "You're supposed to be home," he said without looking at me. "So are you," I replied, pulling a chair close to his bed. He almost smiled at that. Almost. Then his face crumpled in a way I'd never seen before, and suddenly, this man who'd taught me to ride a bike and change a tire and stand up for myself was crying, quietly, tears sliding down into his pillow. I was scared. "Sarah," he whispered. "I knew something was wrong months ago. I could feel it, you know, every time I swallowed. This pressure, this feeling like something wasn't right. But I was so damn scared of what they might find that I convinced myself it would just go away." I took his hand, and it felt so small, so fragile. When had my father become fragile? I kept thinking, if I don't go to the doctor, if I don't get it confirmed, then maybe it's not real. Maybe it's just in my head. And then weeks turned into months, and it got harder to eat, harder to breathe. But I'd already waited so long that I was ashamed to admit I'd been hiding it. "Dad, let me finish," he said, his voice gaining strength. "I need to say this. I thought I was being strong. I thought I was protecting your mother, protecting all of you, by not worrying you with something that might be nothing. But I wasn't being strong. I was being a coward. And now I'm lying here with stage 3 cancer. They told me this afternoon, while you all were gone. And all I can think is that if I'd gone to the doctor when I first felt that pressure, maybe we'd be having a very different conversation. Stage 3. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd been reading about esophageal cancer since we got the initial diagnosis, scrolling through medical websites late at night, trying to understand what we were facing. Stage 3 meant it had spread beyond the esophagus. Stage 3 meant the road ahead was going to be brutal. "What are they recommending?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Chemo first, to try to shrink it. Then surgery if my body can handle it, followed by more chemo and radiation. Dr. Martinez was honest with me. It's going to be hell. And even with treatment, the 5-year survival rate isn't great. But it's a chance." Over the following weeks, our family dynamics shifted in ways both beautiful and heartbreaking. Mom became Dad's fierce advocate, researching treatment centers, diet plans for cancer patients, clinical trials. She filled notebooks with questions for doctors and made spreadsheets tracking medications and appointments. It was her way of fighting back against the helplessness we all felt. James took over Dad's business, managing the crew, finishing the jobs Dad had started. He worked himself to exhaustion, I think, because doing something practical was the only way he knew how to cope. When I suggested he take a day off, he just shook his head. "Dad built this business with his bare hands," he said. "I'm not going to let it fall apart while he's fighting for his life." Emma surprised us all. She moved back home, sleeping in her old room, using her artistic talents to make Dad's hospital room less clinical, painting watercolors of our family memories, creating a photo wall of happier times. She'd sit with Dad for hours, not saying much, just being present in a way the rest of us struggled to achieve. And me? I became the family translator, attending every doctor's appointment, taking notes, asking the hard questions no one else wanted to voice. What's the worst-case scenario? What are the side effects? How much time do we have if the treatment doesn't work? The chemotherapy started 2 weeks after diagnosis, and it was as awful as everyone warned us it would be. Dad, who'd never complained about anything, was reduced to a shadow of himself. The nausea, the fatigue, the way his hair fell out in clumps, it was brutal to witness. But somehow, impossibly, it also brought out something in him I'd never fully appreciated before. Between treatments, during the good days when he had energy, Dad started talking, really talking, about his childhood, about meeting Mom, about the fears he'd carried his whole life. He told us about the time he almost didn't propose to Mom because he was terrified of not being good enough for her, about how he'd cried alone in his truck the day each of us was born, overwhelmed by the responsibility of being a father. about his own father's cold distance and how he'd vowed to be different, even if he didn't always know how. I thought being a good father meant being strong all the time, he said during one of our late-night talks. Never showing weakness, never burdening you kids with my problems. But I'm learning that maybe real strength is being honest about your struggles. Maybe it's asking for help when you need it. One afternoon, about 6 weeks into treatment, something remarkable happened. Mom was reading to Dad from a book of poetry, something she'd started doing to pass the time, when suddenly he interrupted her. "Linda, stop. I need to say something." Mom put down the book, concern flashing across her face. "What is it? Are you in pain? Should I call the nurse?" "No, nothing like that. He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I've been lying here thinking about all the times I could have died without telling you this. That day I fell off the roof in '05, the car accident in '12, and now this. And I realized I've never properly thanked you. Thanked me for what, honey? For everything. For putting up with my stubbornness. For making our house a home. For raising 3 incredible kids even when I was too busy or too proud to help the way I should have. For staying with me through all my moods and flaws and stupid mistakes. You could have married someone easier, someone more expressive, someone who didn't need a cancer diagnosis to finally learn how to be vulnerable. But you chose me every day, and I never told you how grateful I am for that." Mom was crying now, we all were. Dad reached for her hand. "I love you, Linda. I've loved you since the day you walked into that diner where I was having coffee and told the waitress you liked your eggs scrambled with cheese. I loved you when you said yes to marrying me even though I botched the proposal. I loved you through every argument and every compromise and every year that made us more us. And if this cancer takes me, I need you to know that you were the best part of my life. You made me better than I was." It was the most I'd ever heard my father speak in one sitting, and certainly the most emotionally honest. Something had broken open in him, or maybe something had finally been built, a bridge between the stoic man he thought he had to be and the feeling human he actually was. The surgery came 3 months after diagnosis. The tumor had shrunk enough to make removal possible, though the procedure was risky. 8 hours in the operating room while we waited, pacing and praying and making bargains with a God some of us weren't sure we believed in. Dr. Martinez emerged looking exhausted, but cautiously optimistic. They'd removed the tumor and a significant portion of Dad's esophagus, rebuilding the passage using part of his stomach. He'd never eat normally again. Small portions, carefully chosen foods, constant monitoring, but he could eat. He could swallow. He could live. The recovery was long and painful. There were setbacks, infections, complications, days when Dad wanted to give up. But there were also victories. The first sip of water, the first bite of scrambled eggs, the day he walked around the hospital floor without assistance. Each small triumph felt monumental because we'd come so close to losing all of them. Through it all, our family changed. We learned to say, "I love you" before ending phone calls. We learned to express fear and uncertainty instead of pretending everything was fine. We learned that strength isn't the absence of vulnerability, but the courage to be vulnerable anyway. 6 months after surgery, during a follow-up appointment, Dr. Martinez delivered news that made us all exhale for what felt like the first time in a year. "No evidence of disease," she said, smiling at the scans. "Of course, we'll need to monitor closely, especially in these first few years. But for now, you're cancer-free," Dad cried. We all cried. But these were different tears than we'd shed in those early dark days. These were tears of relief, of gratitude, of having stared into the abyss and stepped back from the edge. A year has passed since Dad's final cancer treatment. Life hasn't returned to normal. I'm not sure it ever will, not really. But it's found a new rhythm, a new shape that's deeper and more meaningful than what we had before. Dad can't do heavy construction work anymore, but he's taken on consulting and design work, teaching young carpenters the trade. He eats small meals throughout the day, carefully planned and monitored. He has regular scans and checkups. The fear of recurrence hovers at the edge of every gathering, unspoken but present. But something else has changed too. Something harder to quantify, but impossible to miss. Our family gatherings are different now. We linger longer over dinner, even though Dad can only manage a few bites. We talk about harder things, feelings, fears, dreams. When someone says they're struggling, we don't brush it off with toxic positivity or tell them to toughen up. We listen, we support, we show up. Dad and I had coffee last week at that same diner where he first saw Mom all those years ago. He was telling me about a project he's designing, his eyes bright with enthusiasm, when he suddenly stopped mid-sentence. "What?" I asked. "Did you forget what you were saying?" "No, I was sitting here thinking how grateful I am for this moment. You, me, coffee conversation. A year ago, I didn't know if I'd have any more moments like this. And I realized that's the real gift cancer gave me, not the fear of death, though that's there, but the ability to recognize how precious the ordinary moments are. This isn't a special occasion. We're just having coffee, but it's everything." His words hit me hard because he was right. How many ordinary moments had I wasted, scrolling through my phone, thinking about tomorrow, taking for granted that there would always be more tomorrows? How many conversations had I cut short, people I'd meant to call, experiences I'd postponed for someday? "Dad," I said carefully, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you regret waiting so long to see a doctor?" "I mean, I know you've talked about wishing you'd gone sooner for treatment reasons, but do you regret the time it cost you?" He thought about this for a long moment, stirring his coffee, even though he'd already added cream and sugar. "Yes and no," he finally said. "Yes, I regret not catching it earlier when treatment might have been easier. Yes, I regret putting Mom through the terror of almost losing me. But no, I don't regret where it brought us as a family. I think we needed something to shake us awake, to remind us that nothing is guaranteed. I just wish it hadn't taken almost dying for me to learn how to really live." He looked at me then, with those eyes that had seen so much. His own mortality, his family's love, the fragility and beauty of existence. Here's what I learned. "Sarah, I spent my whole life believing that strength meant stoicism, that real men didn't talk about feelings, or admit when they were scared, or ask for help. I thought I was protecting everyone by keeping my struggles to myself. But that kind of strength, it almost killed me. And it definitely kept me from really connecting with the people I loved most. What's real strength, then?" I asked. "Real strength is honesty. It's saying I'm scared, or I need help, or I don't know what to do. It's letting people see you at your worst and trusting they'll still love you. It's being vulnerable enough to tell your wife you love her, not just on anniversaries, but on random Tuesdays. It's admitting when you're wrong, when you're hurting, when you're human." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "And real strength is paying attention, not just going through the motions, but actually being present for your life. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. You think you have time. You think you can put off the doctor's appointment, the difficult conversation, the I love you until tomorrow. But tomorrow isn't guaranteed. Those symptoms I ignored for months. Every one of them was my body screaming at me that something was wrong. And I chose not to listen because I was afraid of what I might find out. But you're here now," I said. "You fought and you won. I'm here because I got lucky. Because Mom insisted. Because you pushed. Because the cancer was caught before it was too late, even though it was almost too late. But Sarah, so many people don't get lucky. So many people wait until symptoms become unbearable, until treatable becomes terminal. And I don't want anyone to learn this lesson the way I did." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the world go by outside the diner window. People rushing to appointments, checking their phones, living their lives without realizing how quickly it could all change. "Promise me something," Dad said suddenly. "Anything. Promise me that if you ever feel something wrong in your body, you won't ignore it. Promise me you won't let fear or pride or denial keep you from getting help. Promise me you'll choose life over ego every single time. I promise. And promise me you'll tell the people you love that you love them. Not just in big moments, but in small ones. Because those small moments, they're actually the big ones. We just don't realize it until they're gone." I think about that conversation every day now. about how my father's stubbornness almost cost him everything, but his willingness to change saved not just his life, but our entire family. About how the symptom wasn't where we thought it was, and the problem ran deeper than any of us imagined. He vomited everything he ate, but the problem wasn't his stomach. It was a blockage in his esophagus, hidden and growing, slowly stealing his ability to nourish himself. But the real blockage, the one that almost killed him, was emotional. The wall he'd built around his feelings, his refusal to be vulnerable, his belief that asking for help was weakness. Cancer tore down those walls. It forced honesty. It gave us permission to love each other out loud, imperfectly, completely. And while I wouldn't wish what we went through on anyone, I also can't imagine who we'd be without it. So I'm asking you now, whoever you are, wherever you're watching this from, have you been ignoring symptoms your body is trying to tell you about? Are there walls you've built that are keeping you from truly connecting with the people you love? Are you living like you have all the time in the world, or are you present for the precious, ordinary moments that make up a life? Don't wait for a crisis to wake you up. Don't let pride or fear keep you from getting help when you need it. And please, tell the people you love that you love them today, not someday, because we never know how many todays we have left. If this story touched your heart, subscribe for more real-life stories that remind us what really matters. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And most importantly, take care of yourself and the people you love. They're counting on you to be here tomorrow.